Greetings, tribe family. It's been a while since I've done a video on the real story, but every now and then I like to drop a receipt. So, without further ado, here it is. And remember, the truth is in the proof. Ashe.
Today, we will be discussing how Asian slaves became Indians. I'm going to go into depth about how Chinos became reclassified as Indians or indigenous people. Moreover, while indigenous people were reclassified as African and Negroes, Chino slaves were allowed to obtain an indigenous identity and status. The main source of information used for this discussion will be from the book Asian Slaves in Colonial Mexico, From Chinos to Indians by Tatiana Sayas. What's interesting here is that the subject of Asian slaves in Spanish America is not discussed or widely known. In fact, in Tatiana Sayas' book, she states that her book is the first that traces Chino origins in Asia. My goal in this particular episode is to touch on key points which is not readily known to the public. All right. After parts of Asia were conquered by the Spanish crown, Asian people were put into slavery on their own land and later on shipped to places such as Mexico, Peru, and Chile. In other words, they were shipped to Spanish controlled colonies in America. Now, this is a quote from the book, Asian Slaves in Colonial Mexico. Quote, the foundation of the Spanish Philippines gave rise to the Trans-Pacific slave trade. Manila became the colonial outpost in Asia where slaves were purchased and the Manila galleon ships afforded transport to Mexico. Manila was a slave society during the 17th century. Slaves did the majority of the labor, and master slave relations shaped the general social order. Within years after the Spanish conquest, the bustling port city had some 40,000 residents of diverse origins. A full quarter of this population was enslaved. They were craftspeople, manual laborers, and servants who upheld their master's social structure. By the 1620s, the city had 8,000 indigenous slaves and 2,000 foreign slaves, in addition to an untold number of Muslim slaves. The whole of the city was a slave market, supplying labor to Spanish colonists and indigenous elites. Slave auctions were held in the plazas found within the city walls, and masters also sold slaves through individual transactions. The unorganized nature of the market makes it nearly impossible to quantify the volume of slaves, but it is clear that Manila was an emporium for slaves. Masters from throughout the Philippines knew to come to the capital to secure chattel property. Now, these slaves were from diverse places, and they were called Chino slaves. And they came from places such as Philippines, India, Bengal, Indonesia, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Japan, China, and other places. Now, once in Mexico, all of these people became Chino slaves.